Okay, welcome to the final video on past perfect progressive. So, in this video we're going to talk a little bit about when should I use past perfect progressive, and maybe even emphasize a little bit more, when should I not use past perfect progressive. There's one important time. First, let's talk about the time we use past perfect progressive. So I use past perfect progressive, or you use past perfect progressive when you want to say that an action happened over time until or almost until something in the past. Then I use past perfect progressive. Let's think of an example. Let's say, oh, I had a situation. My boss gave me a raise. In other words, my boss started paying me more money. And I want to say, I was working there a very long time before my boss gave me a raise. I was working a very long time until or almost until my boss gave me a raise. So if I draw that picture, I might say, oh, I started to work and I was working a long time before my boss gave me a raise. So I might say, oh, I want to tell somebody that this happened over time until or almost until my boss gave me a raise. So I could say, I have been working at my job a long time, not joy, at my job a long time. Before my boss gave me a raise, or before my boss started paying me more. Okay, so basic rule is, if I want to show this situation, something's happening over time until or almost until something in the past, I'll use past perfect progressive. But there's one time that I can't, and let's talk about that. But I can't use, and I'd say, let's see, but I can't use past perfect progressive with stative verbs. Or stative verbs are also sometimes called non-progressive verbs. Or they're sometimes called non-action verbs. Oops. So you might have studied these and gotten different names, but stative verbs, non-progressive verbs, non-action verbs, they are all the same thing, and they're basically verbs in English that we normally don't use with progressive tenses. Like, we don't use them with present perfect, not present progressive, present perfect progressive, past progressive. Let me just see. In this book, Understanding and Using English Grammar, you'll find a list of stative verbs here on page 7. And it says verbs usually not used in the progressive. Verbs usually not used in the progressive, stative verbs. And in this book, let me just see, there's a list of them on page, hold on. There's a list of them on page, we're waiting, on page 34. So if you want to get a list of stative verbs, verbs that are normally not used in progressive tenses, then page 34 this book, page 15 this book. Also, if you just do a web search, if you Google or Yahoo stative verbs or non-progressive verbs, that you can find many lists online. But these are verbs, verbs like need or want, that we usually don't use in progressive tenses. So for example, I don't say, I am wanting a glass of water. I usually say, I want a glass of water. Or I don't say, I am needing to go home now. Not usually. We usually say, I need to go home now. So, because past perfect progressive is a progressive tense, I don't use it with stative verbs. I don't use it with non-progressive verbs. So, that raises a question, doesn't it? If I want to say this meaning with a stative verb, how do I do that? The way that I do that is, I need to turn off my phone. The way that I do that is that I use past perfect plus a length of time. Let me write that and then I'll give you an example. So here, for stative verbs, when I want to say this, it happened over time until or almost until something in the past. Then for stative verbs, I use past perfect plus a length of time. And let me give you an example. Let's use the stative verb love, okay? And I want to show, let me see. Let's say that that Barney loves Betty. And here, Barney asked Betty to marry him. Asked Betty to marry. But before he asked Betty to marry, for a long time, he loved her. And so he loved her for a long time until, or almost until, she asked her to marry him. So here I say, oh, here I have this situation. It happened over time, until or almost until something in the past, but love is a stative verb. It's there on page 15, or it's there on page 34. So I can't use past perfect progressive. What I have to do is I have to use past perfect and a length of time. So I would say, Barney had loved Betty, and I might say, so here I use past perfect, and then I have a length of time. Had loved Betty for many years. Before he asked her, or let's say I could say before. I could also say when. Before he asked her to marry him. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this video pretty short and not give a whole bunch of examples. But the main thing is, if I want to say that something happens over time, until or almost until something in the past, I'll use past perfect progressive. That's when I use this word. That's what it means. But I cannot use past perfect progressive with stative verbs, the verbs on page 15 or page 34 of those grammar books. For stative verbs, if I want to show this meaning, happened over time until or almost until something in the past, I need to use past perfect and a length of time. So I could say, Barney had loved Betty for many years before he asked her to marry him. So if I use past perfect with a length of time, then it will mean the same thing as past perfect progressive. So, if you want a simple rule, When I mean this, when I mean happened over time until or almost until something in the past. For most verbs, use past perfect progressive. For stative verbs, use past perfect and a length of time. Okay. Thank you.